the impacts of climate change are becoming ever more transparent, and there'll be ever more pressure on countries to honour their commitments and carry their part of the load. So we've already had the US talking about border tariffs, for example, and the Chinese are equally concerned about this. They don't want to be doing all of this heavy lifting and then find that other countries are not doing their bit. So I think this is going to become increasingly an issue for international negotiations. And could I just say, at the same time, what we're seeing is the science of climate change becoming much more rigorous. So it was always, it has been good for the last 20 years, but we're getting good to the point now where we can tie individual weather events to the emissions. And that happened for the first time earlier this year when an analysis of the flooding in Wales was done in 2000, right? and a probabilistic estimate was put on the climate contribution to that. So that has legal implications, right? And already countries are talking about, well, we're a developing country, we're having adverse impacts, we now have the potential at least to tie this to your emissions. That has implications in any negotiations that are going on, and in my personal view will ultimately have legal implications within a court of law, because we're starting to be able to allocate liability. So all of this is happening at the same time, and is going to change things. No one designed this civilization. This is an evolved entity, right? No one created it. And it was created without the use of reason, in a sense, much like an ant colony is. And as I started to understand about what are called superorganisms in biology, which are entities of cooperating individuals, where the individuals become so interdependent they almost can't live alone anymore, can't survive alone. You see some fascinating things that we are a superorganism. We have all of the aspects and manifestations of a superorganism, but ours is different. The insect superorganisms are genetically based. And perhaps the best way to deal with that, could I go back to Plato and the Republic, because he's the guy who got it right over 2,500 years ago. Plato was talking about what a perfect society might look like. And he said, in a perfect society, there is no difference between mine and thine. Right? That everything is shared in common. And people have read this as being some sort of presentment of communism or whatever. But actually, if you think about what Plato's talking about, take it apart, he's talking about ant societies, right? Because they're genetically so related, there is no difference between what's good for the individual ant and what's good for the colony as a whole. Us humans aren't like that, and we have to operate differently. And if you read Plato on democracy, he says, he classifies democracy as among the imperfect societies, And it is imperfect. It's, as Churchill said, it's the worst of all possible forms of government, except for the others tried on from time to time in this world of woe of ours, which is true. And that doesn't mean we're not a superorganism. We are a superorganism, but we're a superorganism that's bound together by ideas and by the division of labour. And of course we are willful, selfish, individual, upright apes, and cooperation for us is not as easy as it is for the ants, where the difference between mine and thine doesn't exist, So it's within that political context that we have to work towards solutions. And we've got to get programs in place now to do that.
Right.
In Canada, you've gone from minus 17% target, I think it is, beyond 2005 levels. But the policies aren't in place, as far as I can see, to come anywhere near that. But it's so important that this time, not like Kyoto, but this time countries honour those pledges, because if we don't, there's a serious risk that we'll miss the opportunity to stabilise the climate.
But what makes you think that that's going to happen? I mean, Kyoto, as I understand it, was a legally binding document, and people ignored it, countries ignored it.
Which countries?
Canada.
Yeah, and which other ones?
The US.
Didn't ever ratify it.
They didn't ratify it, so they were... Okay.
But who else ratified and didn't honour it?
Well...
So I don't want to, but yeah, you're right. That's right.
That's right. Well, and
most countries take their treaty obligations very, very seriously, because in politics, your trust is everything. And so this is important stuff.
Right, but Copenhagen isn't a court, and it's not even legally binding. So, I mean, what gives you the faith? What gives you the hope that people are going to be, this time they're going to mean it?
Because people's word actually counts, and people have to trust each other to move forward, and countries don't make these commitments lightly. Right? So China, it's got the most ambitious, arguably the most ambitious targets of anyone because their pollution is so high. But they actually took a hit to their economic growth. They closed down factories for weeks at a time to meet their target. And they knew it was going to be incredibly tough, and they know that going from here on it's going to be even tougher, and yet they're determined to do it. So you see a country that actually takes a hit in its GDP to achieve the target, you know they're serious. So in Australia, it's the same. We're having this great political struggle at the moment to get these mechanisms in place to honour those targets. And you're sure it's not a legally binding treaty, but do you think that when you default on Kyoto next year that the blue helmets are going to come in here and arrest the PM and take him off for the $1 billion that he owes the world? I don't think so, you know. So legally binding or not, it's a matter of your word being your bond, and in politics that's important.
Right, so Canada has a pretty bad reputation in the
I'm really sad to say that it's becoming increasingly isolated internationally, and its reputation is tarnished by what's happening.